Okay, for people who are joining this live stream, something a little different today. We are about to launch our function repository, and I wanted to take a look through some of the contributed functions in the function repository and try and understand more about the style guidelines that we want to use, and make some last-minute fixes. And it should all be super easy. That's the theory, at least. Okay, so we've just picked random functions from the function repository. Let's launch here. Arcsine degree. Yeah, looks fine. I mean, I think that some of these will just say it's fine. I mean, there's nothing to say about this one. I'm good with this one. To full string. Create a string of the full form of an expression with fully qualified system names, symbol names. I mean, by the way, the best thing here is if I can just grind through them and I just yeah, obviously there's fuzziness here and the output is wrong, but you guys are working on that, right?
Yeah, I'm still looking at that.
Is that one missing details and options, or does it not have any?
I think I just didn't put any for that one.
Okay. All right. Just this may be a very boring meeting if every one of these is just A-OK. Create the directory for a given file if it does not already exist. That is a very weird name.
We've had ensure directory in general utilities for a while that people sort of know about, that creates the directory that you specify. This one goes up one in the file path, the parent directory of whatever you specify.
It's just a really weird name. I mean, ensure is I mean, wouldn't it be ensured file path?
Yeah, that might.
I think either one works.
Because
this is a command.
It's a verb,
ensure.
Right? It's a verb, like create. It could be create, but it might already exist, and we don't. Like create directory, and it throws an error if you already have the directory. So this ignores it. So that's why it's.
I think it should be ensured.
Weaker verb.
I think it should be ensured, and that's not a change it's easy for me to make. Would you guys be able to make that?
Yeah, name changes are a little tricky, but I can do it. Yeah, it just takes a few minutes for each one, I think.
Should it also, this just occurred to me, an ensured parent directory and not file path? Because that's essentially what it does.
What does it do?
It just makes sure that the file path that you give it and make sure that the parent directory exists. So like if you're doing a put or something, that's not going to create intermediate directories for you.
It does not already exist and returns the full what? Well, okay, why don't you, Rick, make whatever change you think you should make to this, since it's your function.
Okay, yeah.
This claims to be mine.
The first example is a little complicated.
Well, it doesn't have a lot of choice, unfortunately. Well, I agree, it's way too complicated. Brian on the live stream is asking about the previous one. Does it walk the path all the way to the top to ensure all the directories exist? Rick?
Yeah, it does. I was just answering in the chat, actually.
Okay. So why isn't it? I mean, ensured file path seems like a good name. Creates the parent directory of path.
I kind of like ensure just because it's a verb like create.
Actually, you're right. It is the right thing. I'm sorry. This is right. This is fine.
I do think parent directory makes more sense than file path, though.
I don't know. It's taking the file path.
It returns, since it returns the same file, since it returns the file path and not returning the parent directory.
Yeah, I think it's the right thing. I think it's the right thing. I think that look, I think it would be this is a bad description here. I mean, it should say something like create the sequence of directories create the parent directories necessary to fill out a file path, to fill out the path for the specified file path. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it should say parent directories, plural. In the function repository search, somebody's saying on the live stream, if I search for ensure file path, it leads to a one-item list that contains.
That's
that's
really
a
good
direct
idea.
hit issue. Yeah, right. That's the issue of should it direct hit from
If they
this.
search the exact name, should go right to it. Probably right. Probably true.
Yeah.
Yes, it should direct hit just
Yes.
like the main thing does.
Yeah.
If
That
it's a
makes
total match. Probably not
Yep.
if it's just a single result, but if it's a complete match, yeah.
No, exactly. It's the same rules as for the standard documentation.
Thank you, Steve. We will do that.
Yes, good idea. Okay, Huffman decode needs a simpler example, but I'm afraid Huffman decode depends on Huffman encode. What is Huffman code words? Oh my gosh. By the way, this doesn't have separator lines because those didn't exist in the documentation stuff. Shall I go fix this one? Let me go fix this one. Okay, so what do I do now to go fix this?
You can
download
hit
the
source
source.
notebook.
Okay. Okay. And now why don't I go ahead and save this in some appropriate place? I'm going to save this. Let me go ahead and save it in general box, repositories, function repository. Let's call it function
review.
reviews. What's that?
I was going to say live review, but that works.
Yeah, function review. Function reviews, plural. Okay. So here, I would want to, let's get out my tools thing here, insert delimiter. Okay, code to a Wikipedia article. Okay. It's hardly the most impressively done function here. Now, the other one that you were pointing out was the Huffman decode one, which had a horrifically complicated example there. And let me see what I can do with this. So, yeah, I mean, why aren't we just
We
using...
also do have a Huffman encode. It looks like there's a failure of stitching that we need to clean up.
With this one here. So Huffman, where is the C also?
In source and additional information, there's related resource objects. There's some UUIDs in there, but you can just put names in there.
Why are those UUIDs? That's crazy.
It's probably a bug. Yeah, when we went through and standardized them, it probably stores them as
so
UUIDs
those
in the back end.
should be
They should be named.
that should be Huffman encode and probably Huffman code words, except we have no idea what that one is.
Yeah, that's what it should be.
Okay, so can we make a pass to check for that in other places?
Yeah, and we need to fix that bug. They should never show up as UUIDs. That's my
No, I
mistake.
understand. That's what I'm saying is that, well, I don't know whether they should or shouldn't, but
In the back end, they're stored that way, but they need to be turned into names before we render the notebook. Yeah.
Okay. Arguably, let's see, that this should be something. Yeah, we're not going fast enough. We probably should go faster because these things are not, changing the examples is desirable, but not, essential, so to speak. That might be a better example. Did I just pick up this? No, I didn't. So for this, I evaluate this, right? and then I just say redundancy. Yeah, it's nicer. Now, is it Command 7 here? Decode.
Yes.
And, I could start just typing in all kinds of funky things. Anybody know how to get the 2E Morse sequence out? That's a substitution system. See, this is where I get into trouble because I'm about to start doing something that I shouldn't be doing.
Right. It's more productive to do a shallow pass on a lot of things than a deep dive on one, I think.
Yes, that is correct.
I think there are several ways in which, Stephen, not that you want to hear this, but that you're going in the wrong direction here, because we can focus on rewriting those functions that we ourselves contributed, but there's going to be a focus on outside contributions, and I don't know that we're always going to want to do a heavy rewrite when it comes to those.
No, but I think it is worth our while to give feedback on those. I think that's one of the important things.
No objection there. But I don't want to give people the idea that we're just going to completely overhaul what they sent, without going to them, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I agree. Let's use something like this instead. This is a slightly simpler.
I think also, as Bob said, I think it was Bob, we really want to get into some breadth here more than depth for this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Okay.
Okay, I'm goofing off here, sort of, but okay. Okay, just 1 second here. We might as well just do this since I'm already in it. Whoever's making background noise, could you put yourself on mute, please? That's exceptionally boring. That one is just like not even worth having. How do I do one which isn't totally trivial? Okay, look, I'm going to leave it. Rick, or somebody, just fill in something that isn't totally trivial here.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I just need a third symbol. That's the way to do it.
You could do like
let's not spend any more time. Let's not spend any more time.
Pause. Yeah.
Okay, inversion vector Q. Checks if IV is the inversion vector of a permutation list.
It's a semi-technical thing because we also have now inversion vector, 2 inversion vector or something like that.
Okay, all right, fine.
Those notes at the top of the first example are odd.
They're very odd.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we probably shouldn't allow. We should say everything has to be, we should just say that everything really should just be one line here. And that's part of the checking. And then, it should build itself up in the right way. Yeah, it really shouldn't be like that. I mean, is it the worst crime in the world? No, but that's part of the checking should disallow that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cloud put by hash. Okay. Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, this is a really useful one. I like it.
We were talking about that for something just recently. Yeah, it's a really good idea. Okay, pebble stone effect. Okay, great. Magnificent. Why does it... I don't understand. if there's some way of changing this parameter, why is that not part of why on earth is that not part of the original function here? This thing, this wacky thing, whatever it is. Again, we might as well just record these comments and we can feed them back to the authors. Let's try it. I mean, these are internal authors, but let's feed back that comment, see what happens. See what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, we might as well have a second argument, which is that thing, the scaling of the curves, if that's what's relevant. Asynchronous dynamic module. That sounds scary. A wrapper for dynamic modules which causes a placeholder to be shown during initialization. Wowee. What on earth is this?
Yeah, and this is weird because he sets up the actual use of the function with its contrast beforehand.
With its what?
This is a property relation example. It's the first one. Right. This example is contrasting this with the standard dynamic module.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. But I mean, I think that's probably not the right way to do it. But again, it's not heinous. This is definitely a usable thing. It's kind of cool. I mean, again, let me make another comment. This is something that we should obviously consider as something for dynamic module itself as an option, or even possibly default behavior. Why isn't that default behavior of a dynamic module? That's the first one of these where I think that it's a potential built-in thing.
Yeah, I thought that when I saw that.
Okay, so let's communicate that to the front end group and ask them whether that's something that they would like to build in.
Yeah, I think McLuhan has built some real things out of this.
Okay, Carl is asking on the live stream. He says he's got something to convert EPSG codes, whatever those are, to geoprojections, but it's multiple functions. It's okay to be a few functions, but I mean, how many functions? If it's a couple of functions, it's okay. And something like 100 lines of data, not a problem. And by the way, we're adding something that allows you to specify initialization once and for all for certain functions. And you can also use the once function to set up initialization. But yeah, just because it isn't small doesn't mean it doesn't fit. I mean, if it's 18 functions, then start worrying. But hopefully it doesn't have to be 18 functions. Select first by. That's kind of cool. Except why is that ordering correct? The by functions have their criterion lost, right? And this isn't a select.
I think there's inconsistencies in the by functions.
Well, this one is the wrong way around.
And there's some mapping or something going on, right?
Yeah, this is a crazy function.
This is one of the general utilities ones, right?
Yeah, but just because it's been in general utilities doesn't mean that we put it in without thinking about it. I mean, this is a good piece of functionality. I see. I mean, the natural way would be to have these arguments in the exact opposite order, I think. Wouldn't it? I mean, if it's sort
No, no, I think the by comes last. That factorial is third, but the range 10 should come first.
Yes.
It sort of seems like a combination of map and select first, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
So like factorial, then the range, then the condition kind of seems like it would make sense to me.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
So to make it similar to map, like the factorial would be the first argument, then the list, you're mapping it across, and then the condition would be third.
But typically our by functions, the system context by functions, do not have the by first. It is second or third, I believe.
Right, but maybe this is really map select first.
arguably.
I mean, this is probably the wrong name. All right, we're going to
select first until.
It's not until. It's only giving the first one. It's always giving the first one.
Right, but if it doesn't hit it before it reaches some condition, it gives failed.
It is a select first by in the sense that other things are, other by functions up to the fact that the argument ordering is different.
Okay, well, what would it be if it was argument ordered by select first by would have the by criterion last?
I believe that's true. And that list that it selects from would be first.
Yeah, so in this case, it would be range of 10, and then, well, let's get this function.
The pure function, the selection function, and then the by.
Pure function, this, wait a minute, the by, so you're saying it would be range of 10, then hash greater than 1,000, and then what it's by.
Correct. That's
because
what I'm
this
saying.
would be a pure select.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right. This is the right way around. Yeah, this is wrong. Okay, I reckon.
If it wanted to be consistent with take largest by, then the second and third would be flipped from what you have now, I think.
But it isn't the same as a take.
Well, take largest doesn't have that pure function possibility.
No, it just has an end. It just has the number to cut off at instead of the condition to cut off at.
Right.
By the way, Steve on the live stream is asking, what if all these functions are in GitHub repos? We have absolutely thought about this, and we've decided not to do this. Because it's not as useful to have many forks of these things as it is to have a canonical form. I'm in the process of writing a grand blog post, which I actually have just started revising because I realized that I hadn't quite understood the right point. Could you put yourself on mute, please, who was making that noise? Our scheme is you can say, send a message about this function, and you can send that message and it will go back to the author of the function, and they are then responsible for updating it. And there's a procedure if they don't successfully update it. And we'd love to have the community involved in essentially reviewing these things and generating updates. But we don't think, I mean, by the way, anybody can deploy their own version of one of these functions. It just won't be the canonical version until it's gone back through this review process. So you can deploy this thing to the public in your account to the public cloud, and you can give anybody the link to your version of this function. But we want the canonical version of the function initially would be owned by the original creator of the function unless they flake out, basically. We'd love to have comments on this, and I think we're really hoping that the community will help push all this forward. Okay, you know what, Ken? Oh, that's a horrendous piece of code there. Okay, I'm going to leave it to somebody else to fix this, okay? I'm not going to fix this one. Can somebody fix it?
There's also I want to mention here that this should probably return 7, not 50, 40. Should return something in the range of 10. If it's like a select.
It's like an optimization thing.
Yeah, no, I understand all that, but it shouldn't return 50, 40. Because that's not in the original list you're selecting from, in my opinion.
That's true. You're right.
Well, it's kind of like supposed to be equivalent to mapping factorial across that whole range and then taking the first one that meets the condition. But this
function is a mess. This function is a mess. It should be some kind of map, whatever thing. Let's not solve this right now. You guys think about this. This function is not great. Okay, comments and other comments from live stream here. D8 is commenting, all the functions are CC BY. Wish it were MIT license. What is the distinction that we should care about there? Because that's pretty arbitrary what we're doing there. We thought that was the thing that would make the most sense. Versioning information yeah, it's a complicated thing, the versioning information issue. We actually have internal versioning information. There's the question of when, if you have code that depends on one of these functions, does it get blown up if there's a new version? Complicated story, more to say about that.
You'll see on your screen right now, there's a resource history field on the shingle. So there's at least some window into when things were updated on the website.
Say that again, sorry, what?
On your screen right now, there's a resource history. If this, when we modify this and update it, it'll have an updated date there, so you will know when things have changed from the web page. And like you said, there are versions available. We just need to.
Right. So Simon is commenting that open source projects often don't suffer from lots of forks. I understand. I mean, the goal here is to make sure that if people have written code that relies on one of these functions, that it doesn't just get blown up from underneath them. That's the issue, and that is a common problem. And I think that the right answer here is, if you want to fork it, then you can absolutely fork it, and you have a version that you serve out of your own cloud account, and people can use that. And then, the exact processes by which it becomes the canonical version, we don't fully understand, and hopefully the community can help define those processes. When somebody updates their function, should have historical tracking. Yes, we know, and there's a bunch of issues about making sure that APIs continue to work and so on. And we have a whole mechanism, because sometimes we have customers, for example, who want to set up an API and they want it to work forever. And we have to deal with being able to sort of guarantee that will happen, or have some mechanism for fixing that. Oh, somebody's saying, I can't wait to submit my functions so that I can call them a mess. So, sorry, I speak my mind. It's my okay. So Sander wants one reviewed. Why not? Let's look at it. Okay. Towards a random point inside the reference geometry reg by jumping halfway.
And this is Sanders, so don't call it a mess.
I speak my mind here. So D8, by the way, is saying you can fork it and put it in your own GitHub repo. Absolutely. The only thing that isn't going to work there, and which is an interesting issue that we have been talking about, is what's really cool here is that if I take this and I copy paste it, it will just work, he says. Right? And I don't have to do any downloading, connecting, URLs, anything. It's just going to work. And the trade-off is, to have that just work, there has to be sort of a canonical version and so on. So if it's in somebody's repo, then you've got to give some URL to that repo. And I could replace this with a URL. Let's see, could I replace that with a URL to a GitHub repo?
In theory, I mean, we could make that work, but right now it has to be a cloud object URL.
That's something we could definitely have support for, though.
Seems sensible to me. I mean, why not? If it's an arbitrary URL, of course. Yeah.
You have to very carefully specify what can be there.
Yeah, no. Then it gets into all kinds of cans of worms, because this is a very seamless process. And so if somebody has code there that says, delete the file system or something, you're just going to load it in, you're going to run it, and it's going to delete your file system. And that's obviously very bad. And we've obviously guaranteed that the functions that are in the function repository don't do things like that. So that's the trade-off here. And I think that the curation sort of review thing, and again, we really want to work with the community and figure out the best way to have people involved in this, and to have people be admins, for example. There's no reason there can't be community members who are admins on the function repository. That by no means all has to be us. In fact, we'd be delighted if it wasn't all us. We just have to figure out how that's all going to work. Okay, let me try to understand this chaos game thing. This is obviously kind of complicated. So if I were to give, let's see, region, why is the 3 a region? So if I say like pentagon here, that's not going to work, is it? If I say regular polygon 5, is that sensible, or is that going to do something? Oh, cool. I don't know what the heck it did, but it did something cool. Reference geometry. This function is somewhat complicated, is my, okay, create the classic thing. Okay, jump only 40% of the way towards these reference points. Okay, so that's the number of points. That's the polygon count, presumably. So presumably, if I were to say 7 here, okay, it's an interesting question why the Sierpinski thing worked so much better than the other ones. Don't understand that. Jump between 4 corners of a trapezoid. Okay, so at least I'm understanding what the initial point is there. Okay. I mean, this is a good example of a somewhat specialized function. And it's generating graphics, which I think is probably reasonable. This doesn't look bad at all. Jumps. I mean, this is somewhat complicated, and I don't think we can review the whole thing, but it looks format. Okay, so that's okay, whether it returns graphics or a list. This looks like a good example of a fairly specialized thing. Option choices. Why is there an option called choices? Is that? I see. So that is similar. Wow. Okay, I predict that if one really ground this down, one could turn it into. This really doesn't look bad, but there might be some simpler way to do things like that. Thinking about, oh, that's interesting. Chaos game was already in use, so this was generalized chaos game. Now that's a little bit of an upset, of course, because that's another issue here, is the namespace.
It happens.
Is this compatible with, I see it's an ngon, that N is the wrong font there. Okay, is the design at all compatible between these? And that's again an issue, of course. Hey, whoever's mute, please. What is iter? Iter is the number of iterations. It's a little unfortunate. The very first example isn't a default. And I see, what on earth? And this one generates a list as output, whereas the other one generates, I mean, honestly, the fact that the other one generates a graphic as output might be an excuse to give a name like, yeah, okay, so this is a collision of names, and this is definitely a bit frustrating. Comments about this. I mean, this is what can happen. You know, somebody can grab a name, and this, by the way, undoubtedly doesn't refer to generalized chaos game and should. And how does that come to happen?
Right, we've had those discussions about suggesting backlinks.
And as people add things, they really do need to suggest where the thing could be linked from. In other words, where do they want to market their thing from? So this is a slightly different design. Well, that's what's going to happen here. I mean, that's the difference between this being a built-in function. I mean, both of these are perfectly usable and perfectly, you know, they're things to do based on the documentation. Let's keep going with our effort to review things, okay? So ensure directory, I'm kind of guessing, is the same deal. Okay, I think the documentation could be better, but it's not terrible there. Okay, let's go ahead and just in the sake of getting through lots of things here, let's go start looking at some others. Cell information. Oh, that's interesting. Assign and generate a notebook object. Okay, but so if I were to go back here and I were to say notebooks, and for example, I was to get the select first notebook, so I could say, could I not? Could I say, this is really kind of horrific. This is a horrific non-example of the examples there. So what happens?
Probably is a much simpler example, like evaluate on evaluation cell.
Yeah, okay, so let's try that here. Okay. And why the heck is this saying selection move? Well, this is bad. Let's just fix that.
Well, I think it works on notebook selection.
Right. The object is a cell, it does it. If an object is a notebook, it uses the selected cell.
Oh,
okay, so look, why don't we start off here just saying, what is this? Where's the definition?
yeah, I just saw that. That's a bug. That was generated. That one was submitted before we had the definition notebook stored for it. But the definition cell generated. That's my bug. It didn't read it when I had read protected on it. I can fix that.
Okay, so you need to fix this one, but then why don't you put an additional example with evaluation cell and something else as well?
Yeah, I can take care of it.
Okay. Formatted to maximize readability. Okay. What on earth does that mean?
It's mainly just adding line breaks and white space.
Is this really the best example of that? Magnificent. How did it end up being green? Oh, it did some. Okay, whereas the non-readable form, this an input form. Okay, well that's nice. But now why is it in the font of input form rather than?
I specifically wanted it to have like the syntax highlighting and string characters shown.
Okay. Brian is asking, how about author-specific namespaces? Yes, one can do that. The whole point here is to try and have, I mean, okay, that's
It's somewhat akin to contexts other than global. Not necessarily a bad thing.
yeah, except that people don't like using them. I mean, that's the...
Except, yes.
What's that?
I agree with you. There is that except.
Right.
There's nothing aesthetically wrong with them. It's just people don't like them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the question, so this question about how the publisher enters in the name and so on, and which version, if two people have a particular name, I mean, we're trying to make it so it's as simple as possible for people to use this stuff. And yeah, I mean, look, I can imagine a time when one would have something where there's a publisher name that appears on top of this. Why have we not done that so far? Good question. Can we address that question for a second?
Of why the publisher name doesn't appear in there?
Yeah, I mean, why do we not allow people, we could have something where instead of this, it is essentially like a context name, the name of the publisher, and then their readable form or somebody else's readable form. Now, I'm trying to remember why we have chosen not to do that so far.
I think if it's coming from the central repository, we want to keep it this way, but maybe for cloud deployed resources, we can investigate something like that.
Well, but walk me through what the let me think about this for a second. I mean, the basic point is that we believe that the sort of space of things that can be done is broad enough. Yeah. I mean, this is again the challenge that people I mean, I have to say, it's not obviously silly to have something where there is a branded name of, whose readable form is this, so to speak.
Right. We had that in an initial prototype, actually.
And why did we stop doing that?
We put some things in, and people didn't like typing resource function Arnaud B : arcsine degree or whatever it was.
I see.
Well,
I see. So we had a mechanism for this.
And if it's coming from the repository proper, I think we just want to keep the simple name, and users and other developers can have namespaces provided through cloud deployment.
Right. Like you were saying, it's a canonical resource function called readable form that is vetted and good, and we like it. We've published it. It's a really useful thing. If you want to have secondary namespaces that are second class citizens, that is also
yeah. I mean, but the whole point is that there's a hierarchy here. To get something that reaches the standards of our built-in functions is lots and lots of work, and many of these things, just it isn't going to happen, or they're too specialized. The chaos game thing is not going to make it to be a built-in function because it's too specialized a thing. It would end up being some part of some much more general, random iterations, something or other thing. So anyway, let's continue. It's great to get these comments. Okay, aggregate. That's a really pretty standard thing. I don't know why that isn't a built-in function, but it isn't. Okay, replace all outside. What on earth is this?
Blobs are wrong color. We need to fix that.
Yeah, why aren't we doing a regeneration of everything, by the way, now that we have...
We did.
That one, I think, was right as we had that update, and I think we just need to...
Oh, it got approved while we were going through, and we probably missed it.
Well, as a rule, in an attempt to transform the entire expression while ignoring sub-expressions contained in except. Okay, exotic but reasonable. Okay. What is this? Well, that's amusing. Why is it only reflecting points? Why isn't it reflecting everything?
Because it's only in the function repository.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Cute. Okay, could we please put a separator line in here? Let me not pull it out and do that, but that should have a separator line there. Make sense?
Yep.
And this should also have details that say it can be 2D and 3D, I would assume, although it's pretty obvious from the examples. But, we like to put in things like that. Again, very few, I want to be, for example, here, we should be able to have some machine learning-ish thing that will determine that there should have been a separator line here. At the very least, it's deeply suspicious if there's more than, let's say, 2 or 3 input outputs without a separator line.
I have thought about that a bit, and I think I could come up with a reasonable heuristic. Just by looking at
look for variable names or
previous symbols or
percent
signs and things like that.
Fine, if there aren't some of those, and good point. Good point. If it isn't percentifying and it's more than 2 lines, it's probably wrong.
And you can pull out global variable names and see if they carry through.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, if it isn't strung back, so to speak, I can imagine cases where you say, this is how this works. This is how this works. But you're not going to do that for more than 2, maybe 3 lines. And if it goes further without connection, it's a sign that there should have been a separator. So that's a good heuristic to add. At least you can suggest it in the pre-flight.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good resource function.
Well, yes, but you can also run it to suggest in the pre-flight. Okay, image to data URI. What the heck is this?
Basically, like an HTML blob for an image,
Oh, I see.
so you can inline images.
Okay, this should have a separator line. Again, these are two completely different examples, and it'd be really good to see these actually work. Right? I mean, if we've got whatever dog on beach thing this is, why can we not see this as in an HTML export? Am I making sense? How would I? This is what I insert.
Well, I think it's useful in places besides HTML as well.
Where is it useful?
I don't know. We could ask Cody. I don't know if we have Cody.
I could think of an example, like just inserting that into some basic HTML, cloud deploying it as HTML, and then just show a screenshot of it would probably make sense, right?
Although we've now got web image, so we can just use web image.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
I'm wondering why compress isn't like. How is this an improvement on just using compress?
Because it's got all the tagging information at the beginning.
The browser knows how to display that.
Oh, I see. Okay. I didn't see the tagging stuff.
Looks good. Oh boy, this is an old function. I recognize this guy, don't I? It's been renamed. Looks good. Why isn't this? Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. Reasonable enough. Oh, cosecant degree, I think it will be okay. All right, let's do another one. There's a lot of mathy things here. Partition from Frobenius symbol.
Yeah, a couple of our most avid internal submitters are mathy people.
Okay, but I don't understand why this is. Why is he doing it this way? Why doesn't he just say this thing of that element? Again, that's another thing to try to detect, Rick.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see no reason. I don't understand.
A global variable name is referred to exactly once.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
That's definitely something I've thought about, but there's other lower hanging fruit, I think, first.
Okay.
Wait, what was the issue if you scroll up there? What was the complaint about his F1?
I'm saying that there's no reason to define the F1 and then do this and never to refer to the F1 again.
I think the reason is so that you can visually see that this is a matrix with two decreasing, et cetera, et cetera.
But,
in other words,
but it's right there. I mean, you could put it right there.
Then we have two separate lines of comment that don't really go well. He's introducing what the operand is.
I see. He wants
not
more space to talk.
It's not my favorite way of doing it, but
understood.
I mean, is it heinous? No, it's not heinous, but it's not preferred.
Okay, I'm only claiming in this instance that there seems to be reasonable.
Okay.
You know, it's not completely weird.
It's funny that this is called view bytes. At least it's not called bytes view, but I mean, it could more like a bytes plot or something. It's cool.
Is this one?
This one's
published. Is it's not, the page isn't updated. It might be.
It might not be
provisional. I think we made this one provisional.
I think the list that I used to provide those random functions. I think you're looking at one that's not
Well, why isn't it? It looks like a reasonable thing to me.
I don't know. Sushma probably has a note somewhere.
There were some things I wanted to fix on it.
Okay. I see. That's pretty weird.
So printable ASCII is just going to appear
Print,
normally.
yeah. I mean, the visual graphic design of this could be more wonderful.
Yeah, there are things I want to improve on it. I think that's why we didn't fully push it live.
Total number of smallest parts in the integer partitions of that positive integer.
It is actually a function, according to Wikipedia and Math World, I believe. Bit obscure, though.
No, that's fine. That's what the function repository is for. Notebook history dialog. Why is it the crazy dialog? Why isn't it the data from it?
There's another function called notebook history data. So here, see, it's right there. Properties and relations, as it should be.
Yeah, but there isn't a see also.
No,
Why isn't there a see also?
there should be. Yep.
Can we get that to happen?
Yep.
Okay, so that brought that up. That was dandy. So now if I say notebook history data, is that correct? Coolosaurus. I mean, those are horrifying absolute times and things, but that's the way it provides it. I mean, I don't know whether we want to preprocess it here.
Yeah, you could have an option. Date format goes to date object or something.
Okay, ordinal number string. I'm very bad at pronouncing those, but okay, that's obviously useful. That's a little bit infelicitous. Oh, I see. It's just kind of that's not very exciting, is it? Okay. Perfectly harmless. Okay.
Is there a companion to orbital or ordinal number string that gives you the pronounceable version?
Well, I assume that, the fact is, ordinal number string, that would be a problem. By the way, Rick, it should never do this. I mean, why aren't you setting the formatting always to come back as the unevaluated blob?
I mean, I can do that. It's a little tricky, and I was worried about accidentally stomping over existing formatting definitions by doing that automatically.
Isn't there a generic way to do the formatting, or are all these different symbols? They're all in different contexts, right?
Right, and it's not necessarily known that. I mean, I guess it would make sense to do it for the symbol that represents the exported function.
Yes.
But other dependent symbols, probably not, because those could be returned as well.
Yeah, well, they could potentially be returned, but I think that's up to the person. I think you should do it by default for this one. Look, can we not detect which ones are returnable? Eventually, we should be able to detect which ones are returnable.
I don't think that would be possible in the general case, but one thing I could do is, if there are no format values defined for the symbol, add that rule in to format it. Otherwise,
the symbol itself.
Yeah, so if somebody has defined their own formatting for it, I would have it just don't touch it. But if there's nothing,
exactly.
then do it.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Okay.
I will give a shout out to anyone watching of the resource function, format as resource function, that does that. They can specify it explicitly.
I noticed this shingled has no contributor on it.
Yeah, if you delete the contributor by field, we treat it as anonymous. If you want to give us good stuff and you don't want anyone to know it was you, that's fine.
Okay.
Apparently, there's another live stream starting on association and dataset. From who is doing that? I'm curious. One of our core developers, I think. I'm not sure who. So, well, we'll wrap this up fairly soon here. 5-10 minutes. Seems okay. Oh gosh. What is all this? No, that's awful. Come on, guys. Look, we got to stop people doing this. This is really stupid. This is like writing Fortran code or something. Am I making sense?
Well, the author's here in the meeting.
Yeah, as the author is thinking about it.
Okay. Always good to have so D8 was asking, is there a way to remove your contributor by credit? Yeah, there is. You just delete that cell, I believe. And your underlying publisher ID is not displayed.
Right. If you retrieve the source notebook from the repository, you can modify it and submit as an update if you are the original publisher. And it'll be treated as an update and reviewed. And
so but you're answering a different question. The question was, if you want to be an anonymous contributor, can you do that? And the answer is yes. Right? Even from the get-go.
From the get-go, right. If you have one that's published already and you want to remove it, yeah, I guess I interpreted the question differently. The answer is yes either way.
You mentioned not showing a publisher ID, but that is something I think we'll want to add to these pages in the future.
Well, that's a good question for people. I'd be interested to know if there is a if people want to be able to contribute anonymously. I mean, I don't think we care particularly.
We want to make sure we know who's doing what for various reasons.
Yeah, we have to know that, because otherwise there are all kinds of things, like somebody's got to actually put the thing, assign the thing to have the correct license and stuff like this.
Yes.
So there has to be some knowledge of who is doing something. I don't know how that works on other platforms where people just say, oh, I'm putting this. I mean, that's a very weird thing. If there's just on GitHub, for example, if somebody says this is operating with this license and I'm just called, Q or something, how does that work?
Well, our publisher ID system can support like a display name that doesn't
I understand
give anything away about you.
I guess I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to, which is, how do you know that Q is able to? I mean, Q is saying you don't know who it is, but they're assuring you that they're allowed to do what they're doing. It's a little weird. Okay, listen, this doesn't cut it in my view.
We can get rid of the MN. I like having it reproducible with seedrandom.
That's fine. But I mean, just put that. I don't understand why you need to say matrix.
And you should add one example before this that's just matrix pencil style of a 2x2 that you type
in. Maybe.
Well, why not? I mean, it just, look.
I could do it with real numbers, sure.
What happens if I just do this?
It'll get something ugly, I bet.
Why didn't that work?
I have no idea.
Oh, because, wait a minute.
Oh, it has to be, no, it is square. I don't know why.
Don't you need a list of matrices?
Oh, it's a list of matrices.
Oh, right. Sorry.
I see.
Yeah, this was something Constantine had requested, and I completely forgot what it does. That's why M and N are different.
Okay, I don't exactly know what this result is, but
In this case, you've probably got a generalized eigensystem.
okay.
I mean, you can try eigensystem or of those two matrices and see. In fact, under properties and relations, I have an example like that.
I see. Okay, I remember these creatures. All right. Well, there are no huge objections here. I mean, the fact that there's an M there, even though there's an M's up here, is a bit confusing. But that's a detail.
Well, I'm just going to get rid of just hardwire the M and N in there, and
Yeah, I don't understand why this is saying func. Oh, I see. This is another. I see. Well, I don't understand why it isn't just saying x cubed in both places.
That one I think is fine.
But what is this? Why does it say stationary and rising in lowercase? What
classify? Is it a third argument of classify? I guess.
No, I understand that, but I mean, why is it? Well, I see. I mean, those are like common names for those things.
Yeah, that was the design spec when we discussed it on it from the alpha side. That's similar to what you'd get from alpha.
What happened?
Does this work in 12.0? Should, right?
I think so.
Well, what happened there?
I'm not sure why it's not evaluating.
Well, something is wrong here.
Some of these alpha scanner things.
Oh, yeah. I think
versions of 12.
You need a Packlet update as well.
But that has to go out before the function repository goes out, because otherwise people are going to get the wrong answer here.
Should we just mark this one as 12.1?
It's been published. The Packlet's been published.
So why? So if I do, what do I have to do?
Packlet update alpha scanner functions.
And why wouldn't I get it by default?
It's in the layout, but there were.
It's not auto updating.
Why isn't it auto updating?
It is in versions 12.1 plus, but in 12.0, I didn't have
didn't do
Packlet setting.
That didn't do it.
Now do Git on it probably. Packlet update doesn't necessarily load it.
Get on what?
Yeah,
on alpha scanner function context. The context alpha scanner functions.
That's not good enough. That's not good enough. I mean, listen, this has.
I understand. It should be auto update. It should be auto updating Packlet. Or the resource function needs to do the auto update.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't good enough, right? So whatever scheme you have has to cause this to just work. We have to pull it from the function repository, which is not a good thing, because I know this is needed for other stuff. What the heck?
We can also mark it as requiring 12.1 without pulling it, and then if version 12 people want to reference it, they're using it at their own risk, and they'll get a warning. It's probably the way to go.
Well, I believe. Why don't we get it to actually work?
Yeah,
unless
I believe I know what's happening here.
Okay, so why was this not caught in testing? Aren't we running all the examples here as regression tests?
We are.
Okay, so why wasn't this caught?
The Packlet literally just got pushed today. There were some other updates, and
okay, so it was previously failing, and it will stop failing soon. Is that right?
Yes, and I believe it'll work. Yes, all that is true. Yeah.
Okay, and the regression tests. Who are those tests going to?
We need to specify. I'm not speaking of the regression tests having anything to do with the Wolfram Function Repository. These are Packlet tests. In this particular case, there's Packlet tests that regular QA is in charge of.
Okay, but so I'm talking about the function repository. I mean, this is just happens to be that it's a core Packlet, but there's no reason for that. I mean, I'm asking about the
desktop QA team. There's a kernel testing team.
Wow, look at that. Wow. Cool. How does it even know that it's giving, I see, multiple axes plot, but that's assuming two curves and it's plotting them. Wow, people have been asking this for millions of years. That's really cool. Nice. And there's a good example of one where it's not really that general, but it's still but it's already useful.
It'll get used.
Well, it'll definitely get used. This is from an old, what's that? Why is that weird white thing there?
What's that? That background color should be blue. It's rasterized, but I don't know why it has a background color. That's wrong.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Okay. All right, I'm supposed to go to it.
Sander had a good question on the
Okay.
Twitch, if you want to answer that before.
Caesar cipher. Ultimately, with something like Caesar cipher, we should have a way to slot that into encrypt and decrypt. And that's one of the challenges. Like we've built specific repositories for dealing with things like netmodel, but for encrypt, in principle, there should be a way to slot in an additional method. It's a tricky one in this case. I would tend to think. See, it depends whether this is part of a family of functions where there are cases. I mean, in this particular case, it's rather trivial because it's just rotating by that amount. But for instance, I don't know if you had an Enigma cipher. I don't think. Well, I don't even know, but it's not something that yeah, I mean, I feel like if it was part of a family of functions where some of them had non-trivial deciphering and other ones had trivial deciphering, there would be more argument to have a decipher variant as well as the enciphering variant. But if it's just a one-off thing, I agree. In this case, it's kind of silly to have a separate deciphering function. But it's tricky. I mean, these things are always, unfortunately, these design things, as you expand the scope of what you're dealing with, the design becomes sort of ever more complicated and there are ever more constraints. So I think it's okay. So Vignere cipher also has this property, right? That it is just.
Stephen, I think it'd be productive to restate the question, which is basically when to add more functionality into a single function versus split it into multiple.
Yes. Yes. I mean,
right. Caesar cipher can be its own decipher, but most ciphers can't.
Exactly.
And so is it weird for this one to not have a
this might be nice
companion.
if it pointed to the Vignere cipher as well, just as a matter of oh, come now. Ouch. I couldn't find it.
I think there might be another E in there.
Oh, well, that would be a...
Yeah, it's a spelling.
But it should be able to find it even... Not good. Okay, so if I go back here and I press Sander's name, that doesn't work yet. I would really love to see all the things he's contributed.
That would have to be tied to the publisher ID.
Well, no, it could be a textual search, couldn't it?
You can search for Sander.
That could work.
It works. I mean, unless somebody has a function about a belt sander.
Nice. Okay, so why are we not finding this? That was a bug in the. Oh, I see. Because the separated word has an.
Yeah, that might be. It might. Yeah, the search index might be choking on the diacritic.
That's bad.
Yeah, we can clear that up.
Okay, so in this case, how does... By the way, that's not the most beautiful thing here because of I mean, wouldn't it be nicer when we give an external link? I guess we're just giving the URLs. That's probably reasonable.
You can use a hyperlink object and put it in the field and it'll have a label. But I don't see any problem with anybody doing that.
Right. I have got to go to my outside meeting, and I'm encouraging people to go see Andreas Lauschke, who's talking about association and data set. But I don't, with respect to this, I thought they were called Vignere ciphers, but maybe they're not. Maybe I never read the word properly. Maybe one of those cases. There are these words that I realized that I learned as a kid, and I never read every letter in them, and I've said them wrong for like decades. This might be an example of that. Does anybody know how to pronounce this? Okay. Well, at least nobody on the live call knows I'm wrong. Okay. But so in this case, is the decipherment, I don't even know what happens here. Is this decipherment non-trivial?
What, for Vignere? Which I think is Vignere.
Okay.
The deciphering is non-trivial, yeah.
So there has to be a separate Vignere decipher function. Is that true?
I think so.
I think it also makes sense to have a Caesar decipher, just because it would be easy for people to find, even if it is just a trivial reimplementation.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm getting convinced by seeing this other case that, if there's a family of these things, well, it's going to have that. So I think my conclusion is that the Caesar decipher does make sense, because this one needs a non-trivial decipher, and other ones like it will need non-trivial deciphers.
Yeah, I should take back what I said. I'm not sure if it's non-trivial. It's non-trivial to decrypt, if you'll understand.
Yeah, if you're doing cryptanalysis, it's non-trivial, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, but
I mean, that would be a nice function to have as a Caesar cryptanalysis. I think I've done that in a bunch of things I've done with like kids and so on. That's one of the examples I've used a few times. It's doing that cryptanalysis. Good example. Okay, well, we should wrap it up here. I think, my main conclusion from this, wow, what is, as we say, we need to wrap it up. This is a painful process, because one can't go too far, or, one's doing system functions again. And I don't know how many we got through. We got through maybe about 40 here, and this took an hour-ish. So we were doing about one every minute and a half on average. And, 40 we have, so that means it's would take, to go through even what we have right now would take 10 hours at this level. I think, an interesting question is, if we have something out there and it's kind of a bad design, how do we change that design? And the answer is, it's a little tricky, because we're going to have to, that name will have already been claimed, and we're going to end up having to do, something with versioning. It's going to be a little tricky.
Yeah. That's why versioning is going to be pretty high on our priority list.
Well, I understand that, but oh boy, Ethan is saying lots of resource functions that use dynamics don't work in the cloud. That's horrifying. Okay, just I'm a little concerned here as we're looking at this, and actually, we should have done one of these reviews before, and I'm a little freaking out here, because the I am concerned about things where the design is just wrong, but where it's a name that is the obvious name, yet the design is wrong. What should we be doing in that case? Because, for system functions, we don't make that mistake terribly often, because we've had lots and lots of experience at designing these things, and we kind of know how to review them. But in this case, we're not exercising anything like that level of scrutiny, and so we're going to make mistakes. What do we do if the function? I mean, that's why I think it's very important to have defensive naming for these things.
Well, if we have a good versioning system, then even if someone is reliant on, for example, select first by using the existing argument order, we could change it with a different version, but they can still get that old version, which is not something you can do in the language.
Resource function of quotes blah blah blah, right? How do they get the old? I mean, if their code contains resource function of quotes select first by, what are they going to get?
Well, we'd have to provide a way for that to indicate the version.
No, I know, but people are people are not going to do that. They're going to put in, select first by, and then they're going to say, I want that to be, and that's why we had the idea, which I thought we'd implemented, that these blobs, wherever there is an example of one of those, a blob like this would contain its versioning information. So if you were to use that blob in your code, then it would burn in the correct version.
We can look into that. I think that's you run into issues when, if you've cached a version locally and it's relying on the cache functionality, then it won't work the same if I, send you a definition and you end up downloading the new version.
No, I'm saying if you use the blob like that, then you get a frozen version. Whatever the version was at the time that blob was created, anybody who sees that blob gets the version that in other words, that's a versioned version, so to speak, as opposed to a text version, which would not be a versioned version.
That makes sense.
We can kick this idea around and see what kind of functionality like that we can do.
So what we could do, does resource function have a second argument?
It's for properties of the resource function, but I'm thinking it probably makes sense to have an option to specify the version at the top level of resource function.
Well, I think what we want to do is we want to have some form where you can say resource function of like either a version or a publisher name or something like that, so that you can do this. So if you do need to do it textually, you have a reasonably simple form, and that becomes one of these blobs that has the version burnt in.
Right, yeah. We definitely need a simple text-based way of doing that.
We'll be putting together a design for you to look at, hopefully soon.
Okay. Well, I think, Sandra is making comments along the same lines. I think the main point is that the blob should be versioned, okay? The text should not be versioned, but the blob is versioned. Does that make sense to people? And that means that the code that involves the blob will never stop working, because it will always use the version that of that original thing. And if you want the most recent version, you go back to the textual form.
Yep, we can incorporate that.
Okay. Although that probably means that we'll need a right-click menu item here that says make textual or something, or make something like that. All right. Hey, listen, really appreciate the local folk and the folks on the live stream. I kind of feel like we should do another one of these soon before we actually release this thing, to just make sure we're not making any horrible mistakes. Okay, much appreciated. See you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.